Aang and Sidu Liu activated their cores, gaining momentum as they began to jump and move towards the place where the elemental demon was located. Along the way, Aang stumbled upon a rock. He placed his hand on top of it, gained momentum, and jumped over it. Then he turned his head towards Sidu Liu and explained that the speed of the elemental demon had decreased because it had found a hiding place. He told her that they were going to take advantage of this opportunity to find it. Sidu Liu turned her head towards Aang, and while watching him jump over the rock, she asked him if he knew exactly where the elemental demon was located. She also added that this area was so vast that it was difficult to locate a hidden demon. While Aang was advancing at a high speed towards the place where the elemental demon was hiding, he began to stare ahead and, with his eyes shining, asked Sidu Liu not to worry. After saying this, he started to smile, and although he didn't want to admit it, ever since the breath of the elemental demon had emerged, he had been able to sense its presence. When Aang closed his eyes, he could accurately know where the demons were located. For him, this was like a feeling of being able to perceive those of his own kind. Aang closed his eyes again and realized that the elemental demon was heading underground. While he was lost in his thoughts, Sidu Liu caught his attention. As they were both moving towards the direction where the elemental demon was located, she turned her head to the side and saw several warriors. Upon seeing this, she began pointing at them with her finger and asked Aang to look in that direction. Upon hearing her voice, Aang snapped out of his thoughts and turned his head to the side, seeing several warriors who were also searching for the elemental demon. The warriors activated their cores and started advancing quickly towards the area where the elemental demon was hiding. Sidu Liu and Aang looked up at the warriors and became somewhat confused as they didn't know how they knew exactly where the hidden demon was. Aang began to stare intensely at the warriors with a murderous look and thought that the rapid response team had also realized the fight that had happened a moment ago. He quickly realized that it was going to take them quite some time to locate the elemental demon. Thinking about this, Aang decided to take a shortcut. While both were running at high speed, Aang grabbed Sidu Liu's hand, turned his head towards her, looked into her eyes, smiled, and told her it was time to go. Sidu Liu, seeing that Aang had taken her hand, turned her head towards him and became somewhat confused. Just before she could ask Aang for an explanation, he tightly grabbed her arm and they both started moving quickly in one direction. Several seconds later, they arrived at a large and deep hole in the ground. Without thinking twice, while Aang was holding her hand, they both jumped into the hole. As the stones were slowly falling towards the bottom of the hole, Aang quickly picked up Sidu Liu in his arms. Then he activated the red core and started bouncing off the walls of the hole. Gradually, they began to descend towards the bottom. Aang knew that the elemental demon was hiding beneath the castle. That's why he had decided to enter this hole, as it was the fastest way to get there. While both were descending to the bottom of the hole, with a killer look, Aang began to stare towards the bottom. During all this time, he had gained some experience in mastering the power of the elements. He had always wanted to try this. While both slowly descended to the bottom of the hole, Aang looked towards the wall and activated the wood element, causing branches to gradually emerge from the walls. Several seconds later, a bunch of branches emerged from the walls of the hole and Aang used his tangle ability, causing them to slowly form a net. While Aang was carrying Sidu Liu in his arms, he activated the red core and his body collided with the net made of branches, breaking them in half and slowing down their descent towards the bottom of the hole. Sidu Liu closed her eyes, held onto Aang's neck tightly, and started screaming. Taking advantage of the decrease in speed, Aang looked towards the bottom, approached the wall, and placed his feet on it to further slow down. As they were slowly falling towards the bottom of the hole, Aang simply began to smile, as this was very exciting for him. Several minutes later, they arrived at the bottom of the hole, while Sidu Liu was sitting amidst the rubble. She opened her eyes, placed her hand near her face, and started screaming and calling out to Aang, asking him where he was. He was beneath Sidu Liu's body. He got her attention and replied that he was underneath her. As she knelt on top of Aang's chest, she slightly turned her head to the side and became frightened upon seeing him lying in the debris. Aang started to sweat, closed his eyes, and while touching his head with his finger, he apologized to her for scaring her. With a smile, he asked her if she could get off of him. Upon hearing this, Sidu Liu turned her head towards Aang and while staring into his eyes, clenched her teeth tightly and couldn't help but blush. Then she started screaming. Several minutes later, they arrived near the area where the elemental demon was hiding. Now Aang had a wound on his head because Sidu Liu had hit him. While he was stuck to the wall, he turned his head to one side and explained to her that he had never imagined there would be a cave in these underground ruins. As Sidu Liu blushed, she approached him, closed her eyes, and asked him how far away the demon was. Several seconds later, they moved forward a little more, and as Sidu Liu slowly approached Aang, he explained to her that the demon was in front of them. While Aang had his back and both hands against the wall, he slightly turned his head to one side and asked Sidu Liu not to make any noise. Upon hearing this, Sidu Liu began to crouch down, placing a hand on the ground and assuming a defensive stance. Next to them was a room, and in this room sat the elemental demon on the floor. This demon was an 5-finned elemental demon. It was sitting on the ground and sleeping, but still smiling. Upon seeing that the demon wasn't moving, Aang realized it was asleep. Both of them approached the corner and began to spy on the demon. While Aang stared at it intently, he revealed to Sidu Liu that this was the demon they had been searching for. Upon hearing this, Sidu Liu also began to stare at the demon and asked Aang if it was a demon that contained the elemental crystal, or if it was a 5-finned demon. She also added that unlike ordinary 5-finned demons, the aura emanating from this demon's body was very strong. While Aang was spying on the demon from the corner of the entrance, he explained to Sidu Liu that if they started a battle, they would attract the attention of the other warriors. After saying this, he explained to her that they had to get rid of the demon before the others arrived. He wanted to take the elemental crystal from its chest and leave as soon as possible. While Aang was explaining this to her, she simply crouched down and while staring fixedly at the demon, she remained silent. Aang slightly turned his head towards her and while staring into her eyes, he explained that they only had 5 minutes to fight. After saying this, he asked for her help. Thinking that they only had 5 minutes to defeat a 5-finned elemental demon, she couldn't help but tremble. She turned her head towards Aang and while staring into his eyes, she asked him what he needed her to do. Aang and Sidu Liu sat on the floor, and in a low voice, he began explaining to her the plan to defeat the elemental demon in less than 5 minutes. Upon hearing his plan, Sidu Liu was surprised. With a look of astonishment, she started looking at Aang and asked him if they were really going to use the higher order operation of energy. She also asked him where he had gained so much experience since she had never heard of the use of energy that he had just mentioned. While Aang was looking at Sidu Liu, he began to smile and explained to her that in summary, he believed she could do it. After saying this, Aang activated the red core, gained momentum, entered the room where the elemental demon was sleeping, and as he advanced quickly towards the demon, he started staring at it with a killer look and explained to Sidu Liu that he would go first. Gradually, Aang started getting closer to the demon, and within seconds, the demon felt Aang's presence and woke up from sleep. Upon seeing that Aang was approaching and ready to attack, the demon began to smile and its body started to glow. As Aang slowly approached the elemental demon, he gradually transformed into a demon himself, causing the horn of the Demon King to appear on his forehead, and his red core became unstable. While his eyes were shining, he began to stare at the elemental demon. According to Aang's observations, the other teams that had entered the castle were composed of many warriors with extremely strong sensory abilities. If they didn't kill the demon as quickly as possible, teams composed of powerful warriors would come here soon. And if this were to happen, then it would be very difficult for him to obtain the elemental crystal. The elemental demon stood up, and while staring at Aang intently, it extended its hands to the sides. In the palm of its left hand appeared a powerful fireball, and in the palm of its right hand appeared a water ball. Seeing that Aang had been able to find its hiding place so quickly, the demon began to smile and came to the conclusion that he was not just a simple warrior. Aang stomped on the ground with force and gained momentum, breaking part of the floor into pieces in the process. He took a big leap, and as he slowly advanced towards the elemental demon, he saw that it was using 2 elements at once. Seeing this, he explained to the demon that he had been right, as he knew that the demon could control the power of multiple elements. As Aang slowly approached the demon simply raised its head slightly towards Aang. While its body was engulfed in a powerful blaze, it realized that Aang's breath was similar to that of demons. So, to clarify any doubts, it asked Aang if he was a demon. The demon extended its hands towards Aang, causing 2 bursts of fire and water to rapidly advance towards him. Upon seeing that the demon's attack was slowly approaching, Aang became alert. He began to stare at the demon, and in a matter of seconds, he understood how the demon was able to use 2 elements at once. Aang came to the conclusion that in order to use 2 elements simultaneously, one needed to balance the energy between them, thus making it possible to manipulate multiple elements at the same time. At that moment, 2 horns appeared on Aang's head. Now he had the same form as the elemental demon. While still staring at the demon, he extended his hands sideways and used both water and fire elements. In a matter of seconds, a powerful fireball appeared in his left hand and a powerful water ball appeared in his right hand. Upon seeing this, Aang couldn't help but smile. Aang extended his hands towards the ground, causing 2 bursts of fire and water to slowly advance towards the demon. The demon and Aang began to attack each other, causing the bursts to collide, creating a curtain of smoke in the process. While they were fighting, Sidu Liu simply turned her back on them, sat on the ground, and while covering her face with her arm, she activated the shield. Several minutes ago, when Aang was explaining the plan to her, he started staring into her eyes and asked her not to be surprised by his strength and appearance since it was just his special ability. After saying this, he also asked her to remember that he would still be the same. While she was watching the fight from a corner, she closed one eye and began staring at Aang. Aang's body transformed into that of a demon as he stared intently at the elemental demon. He opened his mouth, releasing a demonic breath. Upon seeing this, she thought that Aang's special ability, breath, and demon-like appearance were simply too strange. Upon witnessing the difference in strength, the demon stopped attacking Aang and in the process lost one of its feet. The demon's body was sent flying backward, and as it distanced himself from Aang, it began to stare into Aang's eyes and wondered how he had been able to master the abilities of a demon like him with just a glance. The demon asked Aang how he was able to control both water and fire elements at once. In the blink of an eye, Aang appeared behind the demon, while slowly advancing his sharp claws towards the demon's head. He began to stare at the demon with a murderous look, and Aang revealed to the demon that he was capable of doing more than that. Feeling Aang's presence, the demon was shocked and started wondering what was happening. Using his sharp claws, Aang attacked the demon, but just before his attack could land, the demon activated the water element and quickly moved away from him. The demon moved several meters away from Aang and placed its hands on the ground to stop its body in motion. Then it simply stared at Aang. Although the demon had dodged Aang's attack, in the process it had also received a wound to its head. The demon began to heal the wound on its head using the wood element, causing small branches to appear and slowly start healing its head. While the demon was looking at Aang, it asked him how he was able to use the gold element. In front of the demon stood Aang, who had golden claws on his hand, because he was using the enhancement of the gold element. He opened his fingers and as pieces of the demon's head slowly fell to the ground, he began to stare at the demon with a murderous look. Then with a smile, he thought that as expected, the demon could use the wood element to repair its wounds. Now that Aang had discovered the abilities of the demon, he started staring at it and revealed to the demon that he already knew everything about him. The demon stood up, slowly turned its head towards Aang and started laughing. The demon prepared to attack, but just before it could make a move, branches emerged from the ground and caught its leg. The demon looked down and upon seeing the branches, it asked Aang if he was also controlling the branches using the wood element. Aang extended his hand to the side and used the gold element, causing a sharp blade to appear on his arm. While staring at the demon intently, he reminded it that in the demon hunting conference, this is how quadruple fin demons use the gold element. The demon simply remained silent while listening. Then Aang raised his hand, and as he prepared to use an attack in the same way demons did it, his body started emitting demonic energy and he stared at the demon with a murderous look. Upon seeing this, the demon stomped forcefully on the ground and used the element of stone, causing stones to emerge from the ground and in the process cutting the branches that were wrapped around his foot. The demon assumed an offensive stance, extending its hand forward to create a shield with sharp swords embedded in it made of gold. While staring intently at Aang, the demon told him that they could now see which one of them had the stronger element, as the demon had used all its golden power for it. At first, Aang simply stood still, but several seconds later he began to smile. He revealed to the demon that his plan from the beginning had been to force the demon to concentrate its energy on itself. At that moment, Aang gave Sidu Liu the order to attack now. Upon hearing this, the demon turned its head back and was shocked. Sidu Liu entered the room and while holding a spear made of the same energy as the green core, she began to look towards the ground and stood still for several seconds. Then she activated the green core and while gripping the spear with both hands, she aimed it at the demon and assumed an offensive stance, preparing to attack. Previously, Aang had explained to her that this was a high-level energy operation. While Aang was staring at Sidu Liu, he began touching his red core and asked her to try gathering the energy in the core and then perceive its existence. He explained that she should feel the flow and shape of the energy in her heart. She should convert the energy from an invisible energy body into a physical entity, and then turn that energy into a weapon. Sidu Liu grabbed the spear with one hand. Then she gained momentum and while preparing to throw the spear at the elemental demon, she stared at it with a killer look and decided to use the core's energy to her advantage. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.